The story of us, the story of now.
I'm Erin Mercado, a student at Western Colorado University studying environmental management. What is my community? Before I can answer, let me share some things about myself. I was born in the Philippines, about an hour away from the capital, Manila, in a town called Porac. I spent my childhood surrounded by dense jungles, tropical farms, and animals of all kinds. If I wasn't on my grandparents' farm snacking on sugarcane and mangoes, I was bouncing around the houses of all my extended family, which were conveniently right next to each other in the barrio. I was 7 years old when I traded the hilly jungles of the archipelago islands for Colorado's mountains. It wasn't an easy transition, but I slowly learned to love Colorado. When it came time for college, I decided to stay in state and study at the University of Colorado Boulder. Initially, I was an overzealous pre-med student, and I joined all the clubs and overextended myself with multiple internships. In the end, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. Instead, the clubs and internships led me down the path of public health. I even got the opportunity to study in Switzerland during college, allowing me a small glimpse into the world of international health and policy. I remember the grandeur of the organizations we visited, like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, and many others. Though I was most inspired by a smaller intergovernmental organization called the South Center. Before coming to Switzerland, I thought that the big international organizations were the eminent experts of global health and international development, but that is not the case. I also explored health on a more local level by joining a Colorado Public Health Association program for minority students called Explore Public Health. It was the first time I deliberately explored the intersection of public health and race. Immediately after graduation, I went to work in Guatemala as a Healthy Schools coordinator with the Peace Corps. I lived in the western highlands of El Quiche in a medium-sized town called San Miguel Uspantan. My primary project involved working with local teachers and principals to implement health programming in their school days. I also collaborated with the Municipal Food Security Commission to introduce more locally sourced foods into school menus. Working in Guatemala has certainly redefined sustainable community development and public health for me. While I was in Guatemala, I lived with two amazing host families. They selflessly welcomed me into their communities and quickly educated me on the do's and the don'ts. I will forever be amazed for their limitless patience, humility, and love. Now that you know a little bit more about me, let's go back to the initial question. What is my community? There are lots of vague definitions for the term community. For me, it is shared interests and goals, a deep respect for each other, and sometimes a rational or inexplicable sense of belonging. My community is worldwide. It's comprised of empathetic, fun, and intentional people. They have big hearts and all have something that makes them unique. Throughout the years, my communities have shaped my identity and my values. Personally, my community is my friends and family. It's the work ethic of Filipinos spread far and wide in the modern diaspora. It's the resiliency of Peace Corps volunteers. It's a devotedness of public health and international development professionals. Being born in the Philippines and growing up as an immigrant imprints a duality that you can never escape. I once visited the Philippines and was told that I spoke too fast with my American accent. I also experienced the shame of opening my lunchbox in school to pungent and so-called strange-looking dishes. As a young child, this duality leaves you feeling confused about your identity and therefore your community. It rarely gets better as you grow older. It all came to a head for me while in Guatemala. Peace Corps is often known for its work in cultural exchange aspects. The cultural curiosity between the volunteers and others is inevitable. However, I did not expect my own questioning of my culture and communities. Little by little, I noticed the striking similarities between Guatemala and the Philippines. The landscapes between the two countries are pretty similar, but language was the first thing I noticed. Everything from numbers to common household items and animals are the same in Spanish, Tagalog, and Kapampangan. Food is another large commonality. There's more banana and mango varieties than you can begin to imagine. There's also the same vinegar and tanginess base for chicken adobo in Guatemalan and Filipino cuisines. I like the soupiness more of the Filipino adobo, but flan from any country, no matter how it's made, is delicious. There were just too many similarities to ignore, so I began investigating. I've since learned that many of these similarities are due to the Spanish colonial past of both countries. Until I took a linguistics course in college, I honestly thought that Tagalog and Kapampangan were romantic languages because they were so closely tied to Spanish. Oftentimes in Guatemala, Spanish is referred to as Castellano to acknowledge its roots as an imposed language system. Worldwide, Filipinos still possess the Spanish last names or apellidos forcibly given to them by the Spaniards. I was always so proud to be a Filipino, but what does that even mean? I've since learned that the cultural disposition of Filipinos has already been studied by sociologists for years, with books like The Latinas of Asia, How Filipinos Break the Rules of Race by Anthony Christian Ocampo. Better understanding this complicated history and the residuals of colonialism has helped me gain deeper appreciation for not only my community, but the Guatemalan community in which I resided as well. Isn't it hard to be away from your family? Dios mío, you're an only child? How could your family let you leave like that? This was a common string of inquiry for me to receive in Guatemala. My personal reasonings never seemed satisfactory, so I usually stuck with a familiar reasoning that Guatemalans could understand. I explained that leaving to go abroad is a huge part of Filipino culture and the economy. The Philippines and Guatemala have similar work prospects, so immigration has become a necessity for both countries. On the other side of the Pacific Ocean, my Filipino family interrogated my reasonings before joining the Peace Corps. They didn't understand the decision to live simply for work and were confused as to why I had chosen Guatemala, since Peace Corps was also present in the Philippines. I won't delve too much into my decision, but it did make me realize another similarity between the two countries. They are both inundated with foreign aid money and international organizations. As I begin this strange journey into decolonizing what it means to be a Filipino, I think it's also important to analyze the provisions of the colonial mindset in global health and international development, because it's there. Previously, colonial powers are still imposing their ideas and priorities through more clandestine means. For public health, it sometimes leads to the accidental introductions of new diseases by colonial countries to new places, or the gatekeeping of health knowledge behind prestigious academic halls. It's even worse with international development, since millions of dollars are wasted in insignificant aid projects that only focus on incomplete indicators. Overall, global health and international development have been able to tout their successes because the racist, classist, and patriarchal systems of the world allow them to. While I love my various communities, I think that they can always do better to truly claim the good they say they do. What kind of reimagined future are we jumping into? I think systemic change requires unfettered questioning, learning true history, and intentional actions. It's also about taking the time to better understand yourself and examine the roles of your community in society. I want to imagine a future with a better global community and more sustainability. Acknowledging colonialism and its links to the do-gooder mentality is something that I am still reckoning with, and learning how to serve my community will take time. To me, that looks like community development led by community leaders and also more cross-sectoral initiatives. It's impossible to maintain the health of the public without safe access to foods, water, air, and livelihood. To do that requires analyzing and challenging social inequities. What makes me the most hopeful are organizations like CIRES and the Cloud Forest Initiative, which are both led by local Guatemalans. They are empowering youth and indigenous voices through leadership and environmental management workshops, using the earth and our shared humanity as their basis. Their work inspires me to share their models with all that will listen and acquire more knowledge for myself to continue advancing and promoting missions like theirs. I will end with a quote from Lilla Watson, an Aboriginal elder and activist from Australia. "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. If you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together."